your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News Weekend Edition with Jeanette Roche.
Hello, thanks for joining us for our Week in Review. This week, City Council members in Lethbridge were faced with a huge decision whether or not to save the Lethbridge District and exhibition from financial and operational disaster. A vote of no on a memorandum of understanding would have meant the loss of jobs and the closure of a multi-million-dollar facility that just opened its doors mere months ago. In a vote of 7-2, Lethbridge City Council accepted the proposed MOU that will help the organization pending provincial government approval. January 26th. That's the day the new Board of Governors will take over what would have been a doomed Lethbridge district and exhibition if a proposed memorandum of understanding had not been passed Tuesday night.
The question has been called. All in favor?
Lethbridge City Council voted 7-2 in favor of an MOU that will see an independent third-party review and a new board takeover consisting of Lethbridge City and Lethbridge County administration. Lloyd Brierley is part of the new governance board.
But I can absolutely confidently say that what we've learned in the last 3 weeks was more than we learned in the previous 18 months. So that alone has been insightful, but there is a lot more to go as we work over the next number of months.
The MOU was drafted following last month's council meeting when the exhibition's then CEO Mike Workington approached the city for support, claiming the organization was in huge financial trouble. In early January, 2 full-time city staff provided interim leadership. There is now an estimated shortfall of $6.5 million. City Council last night approved $3.8 million in additional funds required for 2024.
It's really the important part to all of the citizens is the most common thing you would hear. Well, I don't want this on my taxes. So looking at what can we do.
It was also only recently discovered that the new agri-food and trade hub cannot accommodate livestock.
It was one of the biggest surprises to me. This is an agricultural area in southern Alberta, and so if we can't have animals within this building like we did previously, that was a shock, a very big shock.
According to the MOU, the big risk to accepting it is that there will be a significant amount of future operational funding needed from the city, and this could affect budget decisions going forward. But if it were declined by council, the community would have permanently lost the exhibition, its staff would be left jobless, any revenue-generating opportunities would be cut off, Lethbridge residents would lose out on signature community events like Whoop Up Days. It could also impact the relationship between the city and province and the reputation among future investors. Councillors Ray Dodick and Jeff Carlson voted no for the MOU.
I'm not prepared to fund what appears to be an endless money pit. I'm going to vote no.
I didn't know it was going to be $6.5 million, $3.8 million today. Come November, it's going to be $6.5 million. Don't kid yourself.
According to the city, this proposed MOU is still subject to the approval of the Government of Alberta, and future decisions will still need to be made on the decommissioning of the old pavilions and refurbishing of the parking lot. For Bridge City News, I'm Jeanette Roche. A brand new armored rescue vehicle was unveiled in southern Alberta. The unit replaces a 30-year-old converted truck that Lethbridge police were using for the past 6 years. The old vehicle did not meet safety standards and posed a risk for officers responding to calls. Lethbridge Police Chief Shaheen Medizadeh says the rise in tactical deployment over the past 3 years made the purchase necessary.
Unfortunately, the use of our tactical unit has increased every year. Last year, I believe we used our tactical unit 17 times, which was more than the year before, and it seems like a trend. And at any time when we see any potential harm to our members, our employees and the public, certainly when a tactical unit is deployed, we need to deploy them with all the tools that they need, and this is one of those.
The new vehicle costs $500,000, but is expected to last for 20 years. Alberta is often referred to as being rat-free, but most people don't see the invasive species hidden in plain sight. More than 100 invasive plants are calling Alberta home. Megan Evans with the Alberta Invasive Species Council says the concern is not only on the environment, but also the financial impact, as native grasslands are one of the most endangered ecosystems in the world. And if you're interested in the different species, you can head on over to abinvasives.ca, and if you see something, say something. Coming up, a man is in custody in Edmonton after open firing and throwing a Molotov cocktail in City Hall. Stay with us. Welcome back. 6 people were killed when a plane crashed in the Northwest Territories Tuesday. Town Council for the community of Fort Smith say the crash occurred near the banks of the Slave River. 4 passengers and 2 crew members died in the crash. A lone survivor was taken to hospital and later airlifted to Yellowknife. Several people on board were staff members of the mining company Rio Tinto who were en route to a diamond mine. An investigation into the crash is ongoing. Police in Edmonton say a heavily armed man allegedly acted alone when he entered City Hall through an underground parking garage, opened fire, and threw a Molotov cocktail from the building's 2nd floor into the atrium Tuesday morning. An unarmed security guard acted quickly to detain the suspect before police arrived on scene.
The suspect entered City Hall through the parkade. He then proceeded through City Hall with a firearm, firing multiple shots and shattering glass within the building. In addition to the firearm, the suspect was heavily armed with several handled incendiary devices, which we believe to be Molotov cocktails, causing one small fire outside of an elevator. EPS members and City Hall security responded within minutes, putting the building on lockdown and determined the suspect. It is also worth noting that it's an unarmed commissioner that initially detained this individual. His actions were above and beyond, and for that we are grateful, while the officers got there within mere minutes.
Officials say the man was arrested and that he will remain behind bars pending a bail hearing next week. Edmonton police are reviewing a manifesto-type video posted by a man who looks like the suspect, Bezani Server. The Edmonton Fire Rescue Service says a captain within their ranks has been charged with child sexual exploitation offenses following an investigation by Alert's Internet Child Exploitation Unit. 54-year-old Christopher McDonald was arrested on January 16th with the help of the Morinville RCMP. He faces a long list of charges, including being in possession of child pornography, accessing and making available child porn, and 2 counts of unsafe storage of a firearm. ICE began its investigation into McDonald last October when reports surfaced that he was sharing high volumes of child sexual exploitation items online. A number of computers and electronic devices were seized from his home, which are now being examined to collect further evidence. And police in London, Ontario are not confirming a report by the Globe and Mail that 5 members of Canada's 2018 World Junior Hockey team have been told to surrender to face charges of sexual assault. The report says the pending charges are connected to an alleged group sexual assault of a woman in a London hotel room following a hockey gala back in June of 2018. A number of players from that team are now in the NHL, including one from the Calgary Flames, who is currently on an extended leave from the hockey team. The revelation that Hockey Canada quickly settled a women's $3 million lawsuit in 2022 prompted a series of parliamentary hearings, the resignation of its president and entire board of directors, along with 3 investigations. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his MPs met in Edmonton to plot their strategy for the return to Parliament. The federal New Democrats descended on the provincial capital for a 3-day caucus meeting with electoral growth and policy goals top of mind. Singh also says he keeps hearing how the high cost of living is impacting so many families.
We heard from the people, and their stories were very clear. People worried about the cost of everything being more expensive. They're saying that the rent's up, the mortgage is up, everything's more expensive, groceries are more expensive. And they were feeling that worry that what's going to happen next, that uncertainty for the future. They weren't hopeful for a new year, they were worried. and they're worried for their kids. They're worried about putting food on the table. And they felt a lot of worry and fear. And at a time when people are feeling this here in Edmonton, we know this is what people are feeling across the country.
Lethbridge NDP MLA and Alberta finance critic Shannon Phillips says Albertans don't want the province to pull out of the Canada Pension Plan to create its own provincial plan. In Calgary on Tuesday, Phillips said there are many risks involved in the United Conservatives if they do end up pulling Albertans out of the CPP.
That Albertans will have to have a new tax collection agency. It'll mean that we get to file our personal income tax twice, which doesn't sound like a lot of fun to a whole lot of people. And Finance Minister Travis Toews last year in budget estimates confirmed to me under questioning that an Alberta tax revenue agency would cost a minimum of $500 million a year.
Premier Danielle Smith has said that more studying has to be done to see if it makes financial sense to pull out of the CPP. She also says a referendum would have to be held to see if Albertans really want to move forward with that plan. Coming up, Canada's federal court rules that Trudeau's use of the Emergencies Act was unjustified. We speak with one of the plaintiffs who launched that legal action against him. This past week, Canada's federal court ruled that the Trudeau government's use of the Emergencies Act during the Freedom Convoy in 2022 violated the Charter, which makes many people very happy, including our next guest. Jeremiah Jost was one of 4 plaintiffs who launched the legal action against the federal government. He was also in downtown Ottawa during the height of the convoy and captured an incident on his phone that shocked most of the people who saw it. Here he is discussing the federal court's decision with BCN's Michael Clausen.
Well, I mean, first off, the ruling is no surprise, but I mean, it's 2 years after. Would have been fantastic to get that, truth into the public eyes right in the heat of the battle. But I mean, still, hopefully that this ruling can cause a whole avalanche of lawsuits against the federal government, because now anyone who was harmed, anyone who had their bank account frozen, now knows that they have that legal confidence to go against the federal government, and even more so that there's still federal judges who are willing and able to rule against the federal government.
But I want to ask you about the federal judge, Richard Mosley.
Yeah.
So he had stated that the charter rights were indeed violated. What did you observe? What were some of the more serious violations of our rights that you saw?
That's a great question. And even though we did kind of get an overall win in that court case, there were many charter of rights that weren't even touched. And us 4 people who did sue individually, there was 2 veterans, there was 1 ex-police officer, and then myself. And 2 of them had their bank accounts frozen. Myself and another did not. And what would have been awesome is if we had somebody who was beaten, because there was so many people who were pulled behind the lines and beaten. And I mean, I've got the Charter of Rights right in front of me with a few highlighted. And I mean, it clearly states you have to be tried, and we all have the right not to be brutally treated or beaten, and that was happening left, right, and center during those 2 days, that Friday and Saturday. I mean, people were getting pulled behind the line, and it's actually a tactic used. It's called snatching, where you get the more violent guys who run out, grab a random person, pull them behind the riot line, and they would just start beating them with the back of the gun. They would put them in a truck, drive them an hour away, drop them off, and say, "It's your lucky day, we're dropping charges." When there was which is also a part of our Charter of Rights, is you have to be tried, and there has to be a specific reason. And they were just saying people were being picked up because of mischief. Well, is mischief a reason to get butted and beaten and then dropped off in the cold somewhere? And they made these people without jackets. I mean, they would have their jackets ripped off them. They would stand for an hour or 2 in a processing line before they were released without any. And so all these people coming back from Ottawa, don't know it, but they have total legal standing to sue the government for the way that the police treated them. And I think that's a huge. I was talking with my lawyer, one of my lawyers yesterday for about an hour, and she thinks that that's probably one of the biggest things we've missed out on. They need to be held accountable as well. And I mean, I have several RCMP friends, myself being a first responder, and they're not all like that. I'm not anti-police. I've got many friends. I spent lots of time in Ottawa talking to the first responders. They were very friendly and polite there. But that day, that Friday and Saturday when they were cleaning out, that was a whole different breed of RCMP.
Are there any thoughts on what needs to be done to bring unity among Canadians, even though there may be things that we won't agree on?
Absolutely. I think it has to start right at the top. I mean, when you look at the way that Trudeau was speaking about the unvaccinated or minority groups, I mean, to say that a people group is taking up space. I mean, there's a few other dictators in history who we could liken that kind of speech to, but there still definitely needs to be some more written justice on and accountability. You know, I always say those who forget history are bound to repeat it. And I think it's so important that we kind of don't forget what happened and the way that people were, spewing so much hate.
Well, 2022 was a big year from the Ottawa convoy to the Coutts border protest. And when we return, we speak with the mother of one of the infamous Coutts Four. Controversial former Fox commentator Tucker Carlson, who was fired from his job after being sued for defamation and false election claims, took a few shots at Prime Minister Justin Trudeau while he was in Calgary and Edmonton this past week. He was there hosting private dinners with thousands of Albertans as part of his so-called Liberation Tour. While Carlson was in Calgary for the afternoon, he held talks with Jordan Peterson, Conrad Black, and Premier Danielle Smith. The Premier sharing the stage with Carlson has sparked controversy across the province and country, as the commentator is known for his extreme views and has been accused of hate speech. During his stop in Calgary, Carlson referred to Trudeau as a fascist from whom Canada should be liberated. He also spoke about the Coutts Four and called their detention a human rights violation. He argued that their charges of conspiring to murder RCMP officers were, quote, dubious. And speaking of the Coutts Four, the four men have been held into custody for close to 2 years now since the protests at the Coutts border crossing during the COVID-19 pandemic. The detained are Chris Carbert, Anthony Oleanick, Jerry Morin, and Christopher Lysak. They are accused of conspiring to kill members of the RCMP. They, along with others, were at the Coutts U.S.-Canada border crossing in February 2022, protesting the government's vaccine mandates and pandemic restrictions. The four accused were among 14 charged after police say they found weapons in 3 trailers near Coutts. None of the four have been granted bail, and many are quite upset about that, including the mother of one of the accused. Chris Carbert's mom, Betty, joined Hal Roberts this week to share what life has been like for her and her family since his arrest. Take a look.
So, Betty, thanks so much for your time today. When was the last time you've seen your son?
Last time actually was on January the 20th when his bail hearing was denied, his application.
So how tough has this really been for you and your family? How are you and Chris holding up right now?
It's been incredibly tough for all of us. But of course for Chris, it's even tougher because he was a single dad. And so needless to say, he doesn't get to see his kids like he used to, and he misses them tremendously. And it's, in every other aspect, because, every day he wakes up hoping this is a nightmare. And thinks he's, going to go home, and it never happens.
Now, you believe that your son, Chris, along with the other 3, are being held as political prisoners. What makes you say that?
Well, because nothing in this case has been what lawyers would call normal. they assumed many things, like, for example, bail, that they would be getting out, because nobody's held without bail in Canada. But apparently with these four, that's not true. And of course, I can't speak of the information that they supposedly have on the men, but I will say that it seems a little fudged, for a lack of a better word. And if you knew these men, then you'd kind of know that this just isn't who they are.
Have you reached out to your MP or MLA? Has anybody been able to help you?
Not at all. As a matter of fact, last summer I ran into Danielle Smith at a local McDonald's, and I went over and talked to her, and she wouldn't engage with me and told me to contact her new justice minister, which I did, and I never got a response.
So Betty, what would you like to share with the powers that be who are holding the Coots for, including your son right now? What message do you really want to convey to them?
I would tell them, think about this. If this was your family, how would you feel? Knowing that something isn't quite right, that the justice system isn't working the way it should. Imagine how it would feel for you to watch your child or your family member being locked up for 2 years with nothing going forward and constant delays. Yeah, that's what I would say to them. Just give it some more thought and think of how you would feel if this happened to them.
Betty Carbert, mom of one of the Coots for, Chris Carbert, thanks so much for your time today.
Still to come, eye health may be something most of us never think much about, but it's a key factor in our overall well-being. After the break, we tell you about the risks of glaucoma.
January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. Glaucoma is an eye condition that causes damage to our optic nerve, and as that progresses, it can result in irreversible vision loss.
Well, the month may be nearly over, but did you know this first month of the year is also when optometrists want to spread the word about checking your eyes for glaucoma? That's right, January is Glaucoma Awareness Month, which is a group of eye conditions that can lead to vision loss. That sounds pretty serious, so we tracked down an eye doctor to tell us exactly what we should be looking for. Here's Dr. Olivia Viergutz with BCN's Michael Clausen.
Yeah, so yeah, absolutely right. January is Glaucoma Awareness Month. Glaucoma is an eye condition that causes damage to our optic nerve. And as that progresses, it can result in irreversible vision loss. There's actually different types of glaucoma. The most common one is called primary open angle glaucoma. This one, you might have heard it referred to as the silent thief of sight. And that's because in its early stages, it actually doesn't have any symptoms. What happens is we have a bit of a higher eye pressure, and over time that pressure can actually cause some mechanical stress on our optic nerve that's at the back of the eye. And that's where the damage can set in. Now, there are some other types of glaucoma that do have symptoms. These can be blurry vision, eye pain or eye redness, nausea and headaches, but these types are a little bit more uncommon.
Wow, that sounds like a pretty serious issue. Now, who is typically at risk for glaucoma?
Yeah, so anyone who has a family history of glaucoma, especially a first-line relative such as our parents, there's an increased risk there. As we get older, that risk increases as well. Anyone who's had an injury to the eye, that can increase our risk as well. And having certain cardiovascular conditions, so high or low blood pressure, different heart conditions as well can be risks as well.
Right, wow. So is there something that can be done to prevent glaucoma?
So a lot of those variables, unfortunately, are things that we can't control. One of the main things is having your regular eye exams with your optometrist. That way they can monitor things and pick up on any potential early signs that may then lead to glaucoma in the future.
Well, that's really interesting. And it's great to have the option to have our eyes checked and go to see someone like yourself. So what kind of treatments are available for glaucoma, and do they have a different level of effectiveness?
Yeah, so effectiveness may vary individual to individual. Commonly, people will be started on an eye drop to lower the eye pressure. There are other laser procedures that ophthalmology can perform, and the laser procedure, what it actually does is opens up the drainage system of the eye to then lower the eye pressure that way. This procedure can be a little more temporary, and often it can be needed to be repeated, and it's often used in conjunction with the drops. If those things don't work, there are further surgeries that can be done, such as drainage tubes or flaps that also can drain some of the fluid as well.
Well, thanks for explaining that. It's good to get the clarification and to have a little bit better understanding. And I suppose one way to have a better understanding of our eyes is to have that eye exam that you were talking about. So is there an optimal frequency?
The Alberta Association of Optometrists actually recommends we can have our first exam even around 6 to 9 months of age. At least one exam between the ages 2 and 5. And then kids are typically monitored annually. Around the ages 19 to 64, we'll say at least every 2 years.
I have been reading some headlines stating that children today, they may be in need of glasses more than previous generations and possibly at an earlier age. Have you seen this, and could you tell us why this might be the case?
Yeah, so we definitely are starting to see both of those things. So nearsightedness, or it's also known as myopia, that's when our vision looking at objects close to us are clear and things a bit further away are blurry. What we've been noticing is that now that technology is becoming a much bigger part of our lives, especially even kids as well, whether it's looking at a phone, a tablet, TV screens, rather than playing outdoors, compared to maybe some of the previous generations, we're finding this has a link to increase in developing this nearsightedness. And so trying to limit those activities or breaking up the time we're doing those, that can help slow down either the progression of nearsightedness or from it starting in the first place.
When we return, we share ways to protect your immune system during this cold and flu season. We'll be right back.